Today I'm digging in the trash pile, aka most of my workspace at any given time. I've been saving bits and pieces of scrap for a while with the goal to put together a little portable arcade machine. That said, I haven't really planned it out at all, because the end result really depends on what I've got laying around at the time. It won't be polished except in the literal sense, and it won't be pretty, but the best arcades never were anyhow. So here's what I'm working with so far in terms of hardware. A Samsung Galaxy S8 with a heavily worn battery, broken screen, and entirely shattered glass back. The camera lenses are broken and the SIM card and SD card slot is jammed shut, but thankfully I was able to get a 128GB SD card in it. A 10-inch 124x600 screen from a broken Acer laptop. The model is a LP101WSA TL-A1. A controller board for the screen from a large online retailer. You can find these all over the place. The controller board must be compatible with your panel though, so when ordering ensure that it states it will work the exact model of your screen. This particular model is a Q0001154181. It offers VGA, DVI, HDMI, and stereo audio output. It has a little control panel to adjust the screen and control inputs. It's also powered by a 12-volt DC supply, and it has one handy feature. It turns on automatically when it senses an input on the HDMI cable. A wireless mouse with a USB dongle. This also does Bluetooth, but I'll be using the 2.4 GHz wireless mode instead. For whatever reason, Bluetooth seems unreliable when using the HDMI out. I didn't get a good shot of it on camera, but I'm also using a USB-C hub with HDMI video output. It has 4 additional USB ports, a USB-C for external power input, and a couple of SD card slots. I've added some external storage with a USB hard disk, and finally I've got a broken Logitech Dual Action USB gamepad. The first thing I need to get sorted out for this thing is the controls. Right now there's a zero latency joystick encoder board inside my joystick. While it works fine in the PC, it doesn't work great on Android. RetroArch has a bad profile for my board and I can't be bothered to poke around inside the weird directories to fix it. I'll be removing that joystick encoder and replacing it with the board from this Logitech Dual Action gamepad, and then I'll be soldering the leads directly onto the pads of the PCB. This gamepad has a wonky analog stick and I've cleaned up the potentiometers on it, but it still bounces around like crazy. It's fixable, but it's not worth the effort for a thrift store buy. RetroArch on Android also does a poor job with this gamepad for some reason. It detects the D-pad as hat switches, which confuses RetroArch's auto-detect. I'll show you a workaround when I get to the software setup. In the meantime, let's crack this thing open and take a closer look at the board. Thankfully it's spacious. Looks like everything's easily accessible. New buttons can either be soldered to the terminals on either side of the button pads, or on one end of the diode and the other to the common ground. Right now I'm only going to be using 8 buttons. Start, select, left, right, A, B, X, Y, along with the 4 D-pad inputs. This gives me some expandability for when I want to install 2 additional buttons on the side of my controller for pinball. Before I can get the new buttons on, I want to get the old analog sticks off. I could leave the sticks unmapped in RetroArch, but the haunted joystick navigates on its own in the Android menu. An attempt was made to use solder wick, and I quickly gave up and found the vacuum sucker to finish the job. Before I get too wild, I want to make sure the buttons register once connected. Using the continuity setting on the multimeter, I've connected the ground of the multimeter to what is presumably the ground of the buttons. Now I'm going to use a segment of wire connected to the positive terminal of the multimeter to see if a circuit is made when touching the button pad. All 4 look good, so I'll get this new joystick connected. It has 5 wires, 1 for each direction and 1 ground. I don't know which is which though, but the ground wire is pretty apparent. To figure out which wire corresponds to which directional switch, I'll use the continuity setting on the multimeter again. Connect the ground wire, then connect one of the other leads and try each direction on the stick. A closed circuit indicates the direction that the stick is pointing. Now that I know which way I'm headed, I'll get that joystick soldered on to the corresponding directional button pads. Now here's where I'm making a little extra work for myself. I forgot that the old buttons on my arcade stick were glued in. I can't take them out, so later I'll need to cut these leads and wire them onto the current buttons. Regardless, I'll need to wire buttons to the board, and these leads and buttons were handy. I'll cut off the ends, twist the wire, tin the end with a little solder, and then reflow the solder on the pad to attach the button leads. One end to the positive terminal and one end to the ground. I tried a few apps to test the gamepad, and what I settled on was Game Controller Tester by Anthony Paul Hamilton. It's available for free in the Google Play Store and will test all kinds of USB input devices. Select the stick under Settings and it'll pull up a display of the gamepad. This app shows both the button up and button down states, so it's easy to tell if you have a short in your wiring. Mashing all the buttons, it looks like everything is alright. All 4 directions and all 8 buttons are registering. Time to break out the hot glue gun. In the beginning I warned you this wasn't going to be pretty. I'm going to be moving this thing around quite a bit and I don't want any little wires to break. A little hot glue over the base of the wire in the solder joint will keep things from shifting around, and it'll keep me from going mad resoldering little bits of wire over and over again. Remember this guy from the other video? I replaced the old connection on it with a USB joystick encoder board in that one. Unfortunately, the RetroArch profile on Android seems to be messed up. Rather than fiddle with it, I figured I'd make life 10 times more complicated and use an old gamepad instead. And then fiddle with that too. The joystick in this controller needs cleaning, but since I already have a new one wired up, I'll simply swap them out for now. Now I'll finish up the extra work I've made for myself and splice the wires from the gamepad board onto the glued in buttons on my controller. Now that it's over, I'll close things up so things aren't flopping around and give it a little test. This stick isn't as nice as the other one. You can really feel the switches snapping and I don't like it too much. But hey, it works after some controller profile tweaking. RetroArch detects the D-pad as hat switches, but copies the axis values or nothing to the saved controller profile. Fix it by setting all your buttons except for the D-pad and save the controller map. The save location is whatever specified in your directory settings. Navigate there and open the file in a text editor. Add the values for the D-pad hat switches and save the file. Open RetroArch and your controller remap should properly detect your D-pad. If you like to tinker and you're scrapping a laptop, save the hinges. It's a pain to find decent hinges that'll stay open with some tension. I brushed some dust and grit out of the ones from this old Acer laptop and now I'll get them reattached so they don't get bent being knocked around. And while we got things out, might as well see how things look once they're done. I like it already. But can I get all that junk inside is the big question. Let's open it up and see. The terminals on the buttons make things a little more cramped than they need to be, so I might try to clean those up a little bit later. Looks like I can keep all the power devices inside and keep the phone outside with the USB cable attached. It's a handy compromise, I guess, because I'll probably need to pack up the phone occasionally. The S8 is attached to a USB hub, and then the hub is attached to a joystick, the wireless mouse dongle, and the USB hard disk. There's additional power to the USB hub with a USB-C power connector. The HDMI cable runs from the end of the HDMI hub to the screen, which is powered by a 12-volt DC supply. So let's see if things work now that they're all stuffed in there. And hey, they do. I'm a little bit shocked myself. And after propping up the screen, I had an idea for that piece of wood that used to be the base of the joystick. It has a nice grain, so I'm going to use it as a backing for the screen. so I'll get those little rubber feet off and put them aside to reattach later. Those screw holes don't really bother me. I can fill them and mask them with some paint, leave them, or eventually make a bezel to cover the screen area. Now I'll get those hinges straightened and then eyeball where to mount the screen. Mark a couple very faint pilot marks, check it with a ruler. Good enough. And then I'll mark some darker pilot holes and grab the drill. I'm not going to go too deep with these, just trying to get a 1/4 inch or so. Now to get the screen attached. I've left the bottom 2 screws loose so I can get the LVDs cable through to the LCD panel. It can't be tightened down too far because the cable does bulge out from the back about 1 millimeter and it could damage the panel. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any appropriate washers to use as risers. So I'm going to sneak that cable into the back and slide it in, then I'll tighten down the panel. I have an extension cable with a USB wall supply for the external power and the 12-volt screen power supply plugged in. So let's give it a test run. I've got the phone powered off, so I'll turn it on and then plug it into the little USB-C cord running from the hub. So the moment of truth. Nice, right away the screen wakes up and the Samsung DeX logo appears. So one thing I was a little worried about was, will the hinges apply too much pressure to the screen when it's moved? But it looks like they're going to work pretty well. Time to give it a try with a real game. I'm shocked at how powerful this phone is and how well it performs the Dreamcast emulation. In part 2 I'll be going over the emulators and the software side of things where I'll really dig in and see what this phone can do. I'll end my rambling for today. If you have any questions, get at me in the comments section or use the email found in the About tab. If you liked the video, let the AI overlords know by hitting the thumbs up or subscribe, and thanks for watching.